You ever feel like you're stuck in a loop? You see these huge corruption scandals, they're all over the news, and then poof, they fade away and nothing really changes. It's frustrating, right? Well, what if I told you the best explanation for this comes from an idea that's, get this, 2,400 years old? Yeah, let's dig into this because it's a pretty wild and honestly, a kind of unsettling way of looking at how power really works. Okay, listen to this quote. The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. Whoa, that's heavy, right? And it's not just some fancy line from an old history book. It's a really cold, hard look at power. And as we're about to see, it's the key to understanding why some of the biggest, most frustrating problems we face today just never seem to go away. So you're probably thinking, okay, interesting quote, but what does a war from 2,400 years ago have to do with my life today? With the potholed roads, the insane electricity bills, and the kind of corruption we see in the Philippines. Well, the connection is way more direct and, honestly, way more eye-opening than you ever guess. So where does this brutal line even come from? It's from this moment in history called the Melian Dialogue. You've got this superpower, Athens, squaring up against this tiny, neutral island called Melos. And Melos is trying to argue, they're appealing to justice, to what's right, to the gods. And Athens basically says, we don't care. They flat out tell them that their ideas of right and wrong are totally irrelevant. The only thing that matters is that Athens has the power to do whatever it wants. The end result? It was a massacre. And it left us with this really chilling but timeless lesson about what power is when you strip everything else away. Okay, but here's a super important point. The guy who wrote this down, Thucydides, he wasn't rooting for Athens. He wasn't saying, yeah, this is how it should be. No way. He was just being a brutally honest observer. He was describing a harsh reality. So that's how we're going to use this idea, not as an excuse for bad behavior, but as a lens, a tool to help us see the problem of corruption with way more clarity. And this lens has a name. It's called political realism. Think of it like this. When there's no referee on the field, no higher authority to call fouls and enforce the rules, then the biggest, strongest player on the field gets to make the rules. That's the core idea. In that kind of situation, power isn't just one factor, it's the only thing that really drives the outcome. All the talk about morality and fairness, it just becomes background noise. So, what did Thucydides figure out? A few key things. First, this idea that justice, it's really a conversation that can only happen between equals. Makes sense, right? But what happens when the power is totally lopsided? Well then, force decides. Your appeals to what's right just don't work if you have zero leverage. And maybe the most important part, rules on a piece of paper are totally useless if there's no one strong enough to actually enforce them on everybody. All right, let's bring this home. Let's take this ancient Greek framework and apply it directly to modern-day corruption in the Philippines. We're going to look at things through this exact lens. Who are the strong, doing what they can, and who are the weak, suffering what they must? So let's identify the teams, shall we? On one side, you have the strong. And this isn't just one bad guy. It's a whole network, right? Political dynasties, entrenched bureaucrats, their favored contractors, the people who control the budgets, the permits, the whole story. And on the other side, the weak. That's pretty much everyone else. Ordinary citizens, taxpayers, small business owners, the people who actually have to live with the results of what the strong decide. The power gap here is just massive. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute. If it's corruption, it's illegal. Just arrest them. And that's a totally fair point. But this is where this whole idea gets really, really interesting. Because the most successful, most durable corruption doesn't hide in the shadows. It operates right out in the open, protected by what looks like legality. And you've heard this a million times. This is the modern language of power. Power doesn't stand up and say, yeah, we're corrupt. No. It says, hey, look, we're KO compliant. It says there was a bidding process. It says, well, there's no conviction yet, is there? See? It's not an argument for innocence. It's a flex. It's a statement of power. It is the 21st century version of Athens looking at Melos and saying, your little rules don't apply to me. All right, enough with the theory. Let's get real. Let's look at a couple of case studies to see how this strong versus weak dynamic plays out in the real world, affecting real people every single day. Let's start with something we all see, public works. The roads, the bridges. Who are the strong here? It's that whole ecosystem of agency directors, friendly contractors, and legislators with their budget insertions. They control everything: which projects get chosen, what cheap materials are used, when it gets a passing grade. They do what they can, which might mean building a road that's designed to need repairs in a year. And the weak, well, we suffer what we must. We're the ones stuck in traffic because of constant repairs, the ones whose homes get flooded, and the ones who just become cynical and believe nothing will ever work right.
Okay, now for a less obvious one. The energy sector. This is a much quieter kind of corruption, way more complex. The strong here are these huge conglomerates, the power producers, and even the regulators. They control the market through complicated contracts and rules. They do what they can, which is to lock in guaranteed profits and make sure any and all risks are passed on to, you guessed it, the public. And the weak? That's every single one of us who opens an electricity bill and gets a shock. We suffer what we must: ridiculously high energy costs with absolutely no one to hold accountable. Because, hey, on paper, it's all perfectly legal.
So the obvious solution, the one we all turn to, is fine, let's vote the bums out. And that feels right. It feels empowering. But this ancient Greek way of looking at things points to a really uncomfortable truth. In a system that's this imbalanced, just voting isn't the silver bullet we hope it is.
And here's why. Step 1. The deep networks adapt. Think about it. The contractors, the powerful people inside the agencies, they don't face elections. They just wait for the new boss to come in and they adapt. The faces change, but the leverage doesn't. Step 2. We vote for personalities, not policies. Your ballot doesn't have a checkbox for fix the procurement process or make the energy regulator truly independent. And step 3. Accountability needs permission. The investigators, the courts, they often need a green light from the very political system they're supposed to be checking. Plus, the whole process is so slow that by the time there's a result, everyone's forgotten what the original scandal was even about.
So, what's the takeaway here? It's a pretty sobering one. All too often, elections just end up reshuffling who gets to stand at the podium, not who's actually pulling the levers of power behind the scenes. So, if it's not just about a few bad apples and it's not something elections alone can fix, what is it? We have to completely reframe how we even think about what corruption is. So on the one hand, you have the common view. Corruption is a moral problem. It's about greedy people, a lack of values, maybe even dumb voters. But on the other hand, you have this 2,400-year-old view, and it says, no, that's not it. Corruption isn't a moral failure, it's a systems failure. It is the natural, predictable result when you have a system with a massive power imbalance and zero real accountability. And that really gets to the heart of it all. The cycle doesn't keep going because people are inherently bad. It keeps going because the system has no real consequences for the powerful. Let me say that again. No real consequences. So until our institutions, the courts, the auditors, the investigators, can actually hurt the strong without having to ask for their permission first, that ancient line is going to be as true today as it was 2,400 years ago.
So, that leaves us with a really big and frankly a pretty tough question. If just telling people to be better isn't the answer, if morality isn't enough to stop the strong from doing whatever they want, then what is? What does it actually take to rebalance the scales? To build a system where justice isn't just some nice idea, but a reality for everybody, not just the powerful? Seeing the problem this way, well, that's the first step.